Hello everyone, it's Lindsay, and today I'm going to be working in the newest devotional kit from ByTheWell4God. This is Waiting in Day 2. I do have an unboxing. I will link it down below if you want to see what all comes in the kit and what the kit is about. And so I am going to have minimal time this month to do a lot of Bible journaling. So what I'm going to do is off camera, I'm reading through several days at a time, and then I'll just pop in and Bible journal as I have time. And then at the end of the month, I'll have a wrap-up video for you guys so you can see the journaling entries that I've done. But today, before I head out for my next adventure, I have a little bit of time to do a video. So I'm going to work in Day 2, titled It's Still Day 2, and we are spending some time in the book of Habakkuk, which I haven't really spent much time in this book. So this is one nice thing about the ByTheWell4God devotionals, is there's tons of study material in here. And so on Day 2, we were really going into a lot of history and facts and things that were going on during the time of Habakkuk. And we were going to be looking at this verse, Habakkuk 1:2-3. It says, "O Lord, how long shall I cry for your help, and you will not hear, or cry to you violence, and you will not save? Why do you make me see iniquity? And why do you idly look at wrong? Destruction and violence are before me, strife and contention arise." And so I just think it's so interesting that, you know, a lot of us ask God why and have doubts. And here we can see all the way back in the Old Testament, somebody who was prominent enough that even got their own book of the Bible was asking God why and questioning kind of how things were going. Because at the time, the non-followers of God were kind of just going on their day-to-day. There was no repercussions, there was no punishment, and the Habakkuk's people that were followers of God were suffering and going through a difficult time. And so he's just crying out to God, asking, you know, why is it like this? Why is this how it's going to be? And we see that today when we see, you know, non-believers who seem to be living the good life, and we might be struggling as believers. And so I just wanted, you know, a big statement, why, and it's okay to ask why. And so I will be journaling there in that Habakkuk 1:2-3, and I have pulled out the stamp set that comes with the kit itself. This is the Waiting in Day 2, and then I have this one here. This is Display of Hope, and it has this geometric piece that you actually stamp twice to make a wreath. And so I'm going to be doing that with some sticky embossing powder and some gold foiling. So I'm going to show you how to gold foil this today. And then I'm going to stamp and cut out a bunch of the succulents to put on there, and then we'll do some journaling. Typically I try to cover up the title of the book if I'm working on a page like this, but I think I'm going to leave it and do my journaling up in the corner here. We'll kind of see how it goes, but let me go ahead and put you on fast forward and we will put this together.
Okay, so I'm going to leave this portion pretty sped up here in a second because it was a complete and epic failure. So don't craft alongside me with this video. Wait a minute. So what I have here is the wreath stamp, that geometric stamp. And I am thinking that I'm going to do this technique directly onto the Bible page. So I'm prepping the page with my powder tool. And that's because I'm going to do some heat embossing. If you have questions about embossing, I'll link a Tip Tuesday video down below where I talk all about that. And I'm going to ink this up with some Versamark ink. This is a clear sticky ink. And I'm making sure that it's good and inked up because I want to, you know, I don't want to mess up anything on the Bible page, which doesn't happen, thankfully. It would have. So I'm going to go ahead and stamp this down. I'm going to stamp it as far down as I can on the page, overlapping the book title just a little bit. Now you can't see anything because it's a clear ink, but I'm going to cover this with the Ranger sticky embossing powder. So this is it's white and then turns clear, and it's sticky once it's heat set. So I'm tapping this off, and I can kind of feel that there's some grit, like it's adhering to parts of the page that it's not supposed to. So I know it's going to be a mess. So I just wipe it off and decide I'm not going to work directly on the Bible page. Now the Versamark ink does leave like a watermark image on the Bible page, but I'm going to cover it up, so I'm not worried about that. So I pulled out a piece of white cardstock, and I'm going to switch and do this instead. So I've prepped the cardstock with the powder tool. I'm stamping this down with the clear sticky ink, and then I can go ahead and pour that sticky embossing powder on there. And at this point, like, I can tap it and manipulate it and just work with it a little bit easier than the Bible page, so I can get all the excess off. So I think with this embossing powder, you want to heat set it just until it's melted. You don't want to over heat set it. I'm going to go ahead and apply a second coat of the embossing powder. Now, because it's sticky, I don't have to do anything. It just grabs a hold of the new powder, and I'm starting to see some problems. I'm starting to see that it's sticking to places it's not supposed to stick, but at this point, I'm still going to go with it. So I'm just kind of brushing off in the large areas. I'm going to heat set that again, and then I will do the same thing for the other half of the wreath. Now, the problem with this, I struggle with this embossing powder. I've used it several different times. It's just messy. It doesn't give you good impressions. It sticks to everywhere it's not supposed to stick. It's kind of clumpy and weird. I don't know. I don't know if it's just the nature of this embossing powder. I need to find a different technique or a different brand or something. Ranger's usually pretty good, but I struggle every time I use this stuff. But I'm trying to stick with it. You saw my head in the frame because I was trying to get right over the top of it. On camera, you can't see this really, that it's clear, but I can see it when the light catches it. So I'm trying to line up that stamp to make sure that it's lined up perfectly. So at this point, I'm thinking it's okay. It's going to work. So I'm pulling out the foil, and I'm going to lay the foil over the top of this, and I'm going to show you that you can just burnish this with your fingers, kind of rub it in there, and that sticky embossing powder grabs a hold of the foil, but it doesn't give you a great result. It's kind of patchy, and you kind of have to work at it. So I'm going to show you here. It's kind of patchy. What I do is I just take that sandwich, run it through my manual die cutting machine, and it gives you really good, it uses pressure, so it sticks it on there and you get really good results. But what you can see here is there's all these little speckles of embossing powder everywhere but where the stamping was. So now I have all these flecks of gold. Now that's great if you're wanting to go for a more rustic, messy look, but that's not what I wanted. So I tried kind of scraping it off with a craft knife, you could see there, but I was going to be there for days and days and days, and it was just not worth it to me. So I'm going to scrap that. It didn't work. Don't do that technique. We're going to do this instead. So I'm going to heat emboss still, but I'm going to use the Ranger Liquid Platinum Embossing Powder. So same technique. I'm just have a new piece of cardstock, prepped it with my powder tool, stamping with the clear sticky ink. Now I'm going to cover that with this embossing powder instead. And you can see this is really smooth. It only adheres to the sticky ink. It doesn't make a big mess on the cardstock. It's just a completely different embossing powder, and I don't know if my sticky one is just old and so it's sticking to everything even though it's not heat set. I don't know, but I'm going to go ahead and heat set this embossing powder. And this is really, really pretty. It's kind of like a vintage, it's not quite gold, it's not quite silver. It's really pretty, but I'll hold up a side-by-side of the gold foil and the embossed one so you can see the difference and why I initially wanted to use the foiling. Now when I stamped the second one, you could see I took my baby wipe and just wiped off the line of the stamp that was going to overlap, if that makes sense. There's two lines that are going to overlap when you create this wreath, and that way I don't get a super bold line where they overlap. But same thing, prepped it with the powder tool, stamped it with the clear ink, and then here you can see the difference. It's just so much more shine with the gold foil, but it's not going to work for this project. I need to play with that some more. But anyways, I set that aside, and then off camera, I went ahead and heat embossed a bunch of the succulents from both stamp sets that I showed at the beginning. Same technique, just clear sticky ink, Ranger Liquid Platinum Embossing Powder, heat set it, and now I'm going in with watercolors. I'm using the watercolor swatch card that came with this kit, but I've also pulled out a couple from past kits, and I'm going to mix in some more purples and greens and things like that. I am working on cardstock, so I'm trying to use as little amount of water as possible because I'm not working on watercolor paper, and I'm trying not to rub the paper too much. Now with these images, you really could get detailed. You can see I've pulled out the clear stickers up in the top left-hand corner to give myself a reference for colors and designs, but at this point, I've already wasted, you guys, oh my gosh, I probably have almost 2 hours of footage that I'm editing for this video because it was so time-consuming trying to get that foil to work. So I'm just slapping some color down, and the nice thing about the embossing is it creates these little ridges, so it's easy to stay in the lines. Everything just kind of goes where you need it to go, and it's nice for really quick watercolor images. And I didn't want the harshness of a black line. That's why I used the embossing powder for both. So I didn't show all the watercoloring because really it was nothing fancy. I just slapped some color down. fussy cut everything out, and it's sitting off to the side for just a second. So before I stick that down, I am going to put some color in the background. So I've sprayed a piece of plastic packaging with water, and then I've scribbled an aubergine Neocolor 2 crayon on there, and then just smushed it onto the page. I'm just wanting a very light wash of color. I'm not wanting anything too deep. The nice thing about Neocolor 2 crayons is they don't typically bleed through the Bible page. Some of the darker like reds and stuff sometimes will bleed through, but these colors don't. And then this one here, I believe, is greenish blue or turquoise green, something like that. I don't know. It's like a turquoisey green color. I'm just adding a little bit of that. And in person, you could kind of see where the initial stamping that I did on the page directly is kind of resisting the Neocolor 2 crayon, but I'm going to cover it up here with this die cut piece. And I just quickly fussy cut out that wreath. It's nice straight lines, so it's pretty easy to do. And then now I can go ahead and layer up my little succulents. Now, if you didn't want to fuss with all this, you could use the die cuts that come in the kit. I wanted to use that embossing powder on here, and I really typically enjoy watercoloring, but at this point I was kind of bummed with how this page was going because I've already spent so much time. So I don't know, if you want to save the time, you could just use the die cuts that come in the kit. So kind of laid everything where I want it, and then I'm just taking a piece of washi tape that I've rubbed on the back of my hand to pick all of that cluster up together. That way I can keep it kind of how I had it, apply adhesive all to the back. I will have to go back in and kind of rearrange a few things, but this way it kind of keeps it in the layout that I had initially stuck it down. And I'm just using some dry adhesive just to stick it, not too bulky, so I can kind of tuck things in to where I want them. And you could see you probably could get away with just stamping half of this wreath and then covering the other half with the succulents, but I kind of wanted to keep the succulents more like on a third or so of the wreath rather than half of it. All right, so I've pulled out some gold thickers. I looked on scrapbook.com. I couldn't find these ones anymore, so I'm not quite sure which collection they came from, but you could just use whatever you have in your stash. And I've got my title, Why God, and then I end up adding actually a second part to the title here in a second. So with this part of the Bible, this particular book, you have a lot of extra space. So I don't typically journal in this space that's close to the coil, but for this one I'm gonna do it because I've got that book title there that's kind of throwing me off. Typically I would work in that top left hand part of the margin, but we're gonna change things up. So I've pulled out the clear alphas, and so now I've got It's Still Day 2. Did my journaling there, and then I've pulled out one of the die cut pieces and just stuck that underneath the journaling, and I really like how that kind of flows. It kind of drags your eye to that bottom left hand corner a little bit. I've also pulled out one of the tabs, and then this copper succulent washi is from Hobby Lobby. I got it several years ago, so I'm not sure that they still have it, but it worked perfectly with what I already had down on the page there. And I'll add a little bit of it underneath the wreath as well. And I just journaled a little prayer there using my T-ruler to give myself some journaling lines, and that is going to be it for the entry. So thank you for hanging along my mess ups. If you have any questions or comments, be sure to leave those down below. Check out the description box for links to everything that I mentioned today. Give this video a thumbs up if you enjoyed it, and subscribe to my channel if you're not already subscribed. And until next time, thank you so much. Bye-bye.